Number 7. Anne Boleyn, the Queen, who was once a mistress. Ever wondered what it's like to steal a king from his queen? Anne Boleyn knew. She wasn't just any medieval mistress. She was the one who changed England forever. Henry VIII was madly in love with her, so much that he broke with the Catholic Church, created the Church of England, and divorced his first wife, Catherine of Aragon, just to marry her. Talk about Anne caught Henry's eye around 1526 at the English court. With her dark features, elegant neck, and captivating French-influenced style, she stood out among the fair English roses of the court. But unlike many women who caught the king's fancy, Anne refused to become just another royal fling. When Henry pursued her, she played hard to get. She wouldn't settle for being a mere mistress like her sister Mary had been before her. Anne wanted the crown or nothing. For nearly 7 years, Anne kept Henry at arm's length while he moved heaven and earth to make her his wife. He sent her passionate love letters. We still have some of them today. In one, he wrote, "If you give yourself up, heart, body, and soul to me, I will take you for my only mistress, rejecting from thought and affection all others save yourself, to serve only you." Talk about a royal pickup line. When Anne finally became queen in 1533, she had already transformed England. The king had broken with Rome, established himself as head of the Church of England, and executed those who opposed him, all for her. But the fairy tale didn't last. After giving birth to the future Queen Elizabeth I, Anne suffered miscarriages and couldn't produce the male heir Henry desperately wanted. The king's eye wandered to Jane Seymour, and Anne's enemies at court seized their chance. In May 1536, Anne was arrested on charges of adultery, incest, and plotting to kill the king, charges most historians now believe were fabricated. She was beheaded on May 19th, 1536, at the Tower of London. Before her execution, she reportedly joked about her little neck and asked for a sharp sword for a quick death. Even in her final moments, Anne Boleyn showed the spirit that had captivated a king and changed the course of English history. Number 6. Agnes Sorel, the official royal mistress. What happens when a king creates an official position for his lover? Charles VII of France did exactly that for Agnes Sorel, establishing the role of official royal mistress, a title that would continue in France for centuries. Talk about putting a relationship on the organizational chart. Agnes burst onto the scene around 1443, when she became lady-in-waiting to Marie of Anjou, Charles VII's queen. With her stunning beauty, contemporaries described her as having an angelic face. She quickly caught the king's eye. Despite being about 20 years younger than Charles, their connection was immediate and intense. What made Agnes revolutionary wasn't just her beauty, but her boldness. She shocked the French court with her fashion choices, wearing dresses that exposed one breast, a style later depicted in paintings where she posed as the Virgin Mary. Scandalous. She wore elaborate headdresses and introduced new trends that courtiers rushed to copy. Agnes didn't just influence the king's heart. She influenced French fashion. Unlike many royal mistresses who stayed in the shadows, Agnes lived openly as the king's favorite. Charles VII showered her with gifts, including the Château de Bout-sur-Marne, which led to her nickname Dame de Bout, Lady of Beauty. He gave her jewels, lands, and a level of power unusual for women of her time. She bore the king 3 daughters, all of whom were recognized and well cared for. Interestingly, Queen Marie of Anjou reportedly accepted Agnes's position with dignity, creating an unusual but seemingly workable royal triangle. Some historians suggest Marie was relieved to have someone else fulfill the king's demands while she maintained her royal status. Agnes used her influence for more than just fashion and luxury. Many contemporary accounts credit her with encouraging Charles VII to be a more assertive ruler during the final stages of the 100 Years' War. She supposedly urged him to reclaim territories from the English, contributing to France's eventual victory. Her life was cut tragically short in 1450, when she died at just 28, while pregnant with her fourth child. The official cause was dysentery, but persistent rumors suggested poisoning, possibly by the king's son, the future Louis XI, who openly disliked her. Modern forensic analysis of her remains in 2005 found high levels of mercury, suggesting possible poisoning, though mercury was also used as medicine at the time. Her sudden death left Charles VII devastated, and he never found another mistress who held the same place in his heart or French history. Number 5. Alice Perrers, the mistress who grabbed power. Can a mistress run a kingdom? Alice Perrers nearly did. When England's King Edward III was in decline, this former lady-in-waiting to Queen Philippa stepped right into the power vacuum, becoming one of the most loathed women in medieval England. Alice's origins are humble and somewhat mysterious. She was likely born to a middle-class family, possibly the daughter of a weaver. How she first came to court remains unclear, but by the 1360s, she was serving Queen Philippa. After the Queen's death in 1369, Alice quickly became the elderly king's companion and lover, despite being at least 30 years his junior. Edward showered Alice with gifts, jewels, properties, and fine clothes. But Alice wasn't content with just being decorated. She had a keen business mind and used her royal connection to acquire even more wealth. She invested in property, involved herself in lending money, and accumulated lands throughout England. Court records show she was involved in at least 56 lawsuits related to her aggressive business dealings, an extraordinary number for anyone, let alone a woman in the 14th century. As Edward's health declined, especially after he suffered a stroke in 1376, Alice's power grew. She began wearing the Queen's jewels in public, a major taboo, and sat beside the king during state functions. Reports claimed she controlled access to the king, accepting bribes to influence royal decisions and judicial matters. Some contemporary accounts even claimed she practiced witchcraft to control the aging king. Her unpopularity reached its peak during the Good Parliament of 1376, when she was formally banished from court and forbidden from being near the king. The Parliament accused her of corruption and excessive influence, but Alice was nothing if not resilient. She simply disguised herself and continued seeing the king anyway. When Edward III died in 1377, Alice's protection vanished. She was charged with corruption, had many of her lands and possessions confiscated, and faced public humiliation. Yet somehow, Alice managed to weather the storm. She married a knight named William Windsor, continued her business dealings, and eventually recovered some of her wealth. What makes Alice's story remarkable is how a woman of non-noble birth managed to accumulate such power and wealth in medieval England. Contemporary chroniclers vilified her, calling her a shameless, impudent harlot and the cause of all England's misfortune. Yet behind the misogynistic rhetoric was a savvy businesswoman who understood how to use influence to advance her position, a medieval entrepreneur who refused to know her place. Number 4. Rosamund Clifford, the Fair Rosamund. What makes a king hide his mistress in a literal labyrinth? Henry II of England reportedly did just that for Rosamund Clifford, creating a secret bower at Woodstock Palace, protected by a maze so complex that only the king could navigate it. Truth or medieval spin? Rosamund Clifford, often called the Fair Rosamund, entered Henry II's life around 1166 when the king was already in his troubled marriage to Eleanor of Aquitaine. As the daughter of a minor nobleman, Walter de Clifford, Rosamund wasn't destined for greatness until she caught the king's eye. Unlike many royal affairs, Henry's relationship with Rosamund seems to have been genuinely passionate and somewhat tender. Contemporary chronicles describe her extraordinary beauty with radiant golden hair and a perfect complexion. But beyond her looks, something about Rosamund captured the king's heart in a way that made their relationship stand out. The legend of the labyrinth grew after her death, with chroniclers claiming Henry built an elaborate maze at Woodstock to protect Rosamund from his jealous wife Eleanor. According to these tales, the queen eventually discovered the secret path through the maze. Some versions say by following a silk thread, others by following the king, and confronted Rosamund, forcing her to choose between a dagger and poison. It's a captivating story, but most historians consider it medieval fiction, created to add drama to what was already a scandalous relationship. What we do know is that Henry didn't hide his affection for Rosamund. He installed her at Woodstock Palace and visited her often, especially after Eleanor was imprisoned in 1173 for supporting their son's rebellion against him. Some historians believe Rosamund effectively became Henry's unofficial consort during this period. Rosamund died young, around 1176, still in her 20s, likely from natural causes rather than the poisoning described in legend. Her death reportedly devastated Henry, who had her buried with honor at the nunnery of Godstow near Oxford. He donated generously to the nunnery and requested prayers for her soul. Unusual recognition for a mistress. Henry's devotion continued after her death. When Hugh of Lincoln, the Bishop of Lincoln, visited Godstow in 1191, long after both Henry and Rosamund had died, he was outraged to find Rosamund's tomb placed prominently before the high altar, adorned with silks, lamps, and flowers like a saint's shrine. He ordered her remains moved outside the church to a less sacred location, declaring, "The king's harlot should not lie in a place of honor among the brides of Christ." What makes Rosamund's story endure is not just the romance or the legends, but how it contrasts with the political marriages of the time. While Henry's marriage to Eleanor was a strategic alliance between powerful territories, his relationship with Rosamund represented something medieval royalty rarely experienced, a choice based on personal affection. Number 3. Jane Shore, the mistress, with many masters. How does a goldsmith's wife become one of the most influential women in England? Jane Shore mastered the dangerous game of medieval politics by becoming mistress to some of the most powerful men in the realm, including King Edward IV himself. Born Elizabeth Lambert around 1445, she was known as Jane throughout history. Nicknames were common then. Her early life was comfortable, but unremarkable as the daughter of a prosperous London merchant. She married young to William Shore, another merchant, but their marriage was reportedly unhappy and later annulled due to his impotence, an unusual legal claim for a woman to make successfully in the 15th century. Jane's life changed dramatically when she caught the attention of King Edward IV, known for his love of beautiful women. Edward was tall, handsome, and charming, the Renaissance ideal of a king, and Jane became one of his favorite mistresses around 1476. Unlike many royal mistresses, Jane wasn't known for her extraordinary beauty, though contemporaries described her as attractive, but for her wit, charm, and intelligence. The Tudor historian Thomas More, writing after her lifetime, paid her an unusual compliment. "Merry in company, ready and quick of answer, neither mute nor full of babble, sometimes taunting without displeasure and not without sport. In a court full of political schemers, Jane's unpretentious personality and genuine charm stood out. What made Jane unusual was her accessibility. She used her influence with the king to help petitioners and intervened for those who had fallen from royal favor. Despite her position, she didn't amass great wealth or property, another rarity among royal mistresses. Her relative lack of greed earned her unexpected popularity from a public that normally despised royal mistresses. When Edward IV died suddenly in 1483, Jane faced a precarious future but proved remarkably adaptable. She quickly became the mistress of Edward's stepson, Thomas Grey, Marquess of Dorset. When that became dangerous during Richard III's rise to power, she moved on to William Hastings, the Lord Chamberlain and one of Edward's closest friends. Her web of connections proved dangerous when Richard III took the throne. He specifically named her in a proclamation, accusing her and others of licentious living and conspiracy. Hastings was executed without trial, while Jane was arrested and forced to do public penance as a harlot, walking through London in her undergarments with a taper in hand, a humiliating punishment designed to break her spirit. Yet even this didn't end Jane's remarkable story. After her public humiliation, she caught the eye of the king's solicitor, Thomas Linham, who was so smitten that he asked to marry her despite Richard III's opposition to the match. Richard eventually relented, and Jane lived out her final years as a respectable married woman, having successfully navigated the treacherous waters of late medieval politics through multiple regime changes. Jane Shore's life shows how a clever woman could exercise influence even without noble birth or extraordinary beauty, and how dangerous that influence could be when political winds shifted. Number 2. Melusine of Avalon, the mythical mistress. Can a woman be part serpent? The legend of Melusine, the supposed mistress of medieval rulers, blurs the line between history and fantasy, creating one of the most enduring myths of the Middle Ages. Unlike the other women on this list, Melusine may never have existed as a real person, or if she did, her actual life has been completely overtaken by legend. According to medieval tales, she was a beautiful woman who agreed to marry the nobleman Raymond of Poitou on one condition: he must never attempt to see her on Saturdays. Naturally, his curiosity eventually got the better of him, and he spied on her in her bath, discovering she transformed into a serpent or mermaid from the waist down on this day of the week. The Melusine legend spread throughout medieval Europe, with various noble houses, particularly the Lusignan family of France, claiming descent from this supernatural ancestress. The tale appears in chronicles as early as the 12th century, though it likely existed in oral tradition much earlier. By the late Middle Ages, Melusine was associated with various castles and buildings, supposedly constructing them overnight with her magical powers. What makes Melusine fascinating is how she embodied medieval attitudes toward powerful women. Her dual nature, half human, half serpent, reflected medieval ambivalence about female sexuality and influence. She was simultaneously creative, building castles, founding dynasties, and potentially monstrous, hiding a serpentine secret. Many noble families embraced rather than rejected association with Melusine, seeing her supernatural origins as enhancing their prestige rather than tainting their bloodlines. The House of Luxembourg and the French royal House of Valois both claimed connection to her. Jean, Duke of Berry, commissioned lavish illustrated manuscripts of the Melusine romance in the early 15th century, indicating how prestigious the association was. Melusine became so embedded in medieval culture that when explorers encountered mermaids or similar creatures in their travels, or thought they did, they often referred to them as Melusines. Her image appeared on family crests, in manuscript illuminations, and as architectural decorations throughout Europe. The Melusine legend reveals something important about medieval attitudes toward mistresses and female power. In a society where women's influences were often viewed with suspicion, creating a mythical ancestress with supernatural powers allowed noble families to explain female influence in their histories, while keeping it safely contained in the realm of legend. Although Melusine herself may be myth rather than history, her legend tells us much about how medieval people understood female power as something exceptional, potentially dangerous, yet worth claiming connection to. The very fact that noble families would rather claim descent from a half-serpent woman than no exceptional woman at all speaks volumes about the complicated role of female influence in medieval power structures. Number 1. Vannozza de Cattanei, the Pope's mistress. Who could be more scandalous than the long-time mistress of a pope? Vannozza de Cattanei held that distinction as the primary mistress of Cardinal Rodrigo Borgia, who later became Pope Alexander VI, giving birth to his most famous children and launching one of history's most notorious dynasties. Born around 1442, Vannozza, a nickname for Giovanna, came from modest origins in Rome. Little is known of her early life, but by her mid-20s she had caught the eye of Cardinal Rodrigo Borgia, a wealthy and influential Spanish cardinal with a reputation for womanizing. Their relationship began around 1470 and would last for over a decade, an eternity, in the world of Renaissance affairs. What distinguished Vannozza from Borgia's many other conquests was her intelligence and practicality. She wasn't just a beautiful diversion, but a partner who understood the realities of her position. During their relationship, she gave birth to 4 children who would change the course of Renaissance history: Giovanni, Juan Cesare, Lucrezia, and Joffre Borgia. Rodrigo didn't hide his children. Instead, he acknowledged them and actively promoted their interests, arranging prestigious marriages for them and appointing them to important positions once he became Pope Alexander VI in 1492. This openness about his nephews and niece, the official fiction, was shocking, even in a Renaissance church known for corruption. Vannozza herself showed remarkable business acumen. While officially married to other men, Rodrigo arranged marriages for her as cover for their relationship. She built her own fortune through investments in Roman inns, vineyards, and properties. By the time Rodrigo moved on to younger mistresses, particularly Giulia Farnese, known as Giulia la Bella Vannozza, had established herself as a wealthy and independent woman. What makes Vannozza's story particularly interesting is how she maintained connections with her children even after her relationship with their father ended. Unlike many mistresses who were discarded and forgotten, Vannozza remained an influence in her children's lives. When Rodrigo became pope in 1492, Vannozza didn't cause scandal by trying to maintain her connection to him. Instead, she focused on supporting her children's advancement and managing her businesses. Her relationship with her daughter Lucrezia seems to have been particularly strong. When Lucrezia needed support during her difficult marriages, Vannozza was there, providing maternal guidance even as Lucrezia was being used as a political pawn by her father and brother. Vannozza lived to see the rise and fall of her children's fortunes. Her son Juan was mysteriously murdered in 1497, with some historians suspecting her other son, Cesare. Cesare himself rose to tremendous power as a cardinal and then a military leader before losing everything after his father's death. Lucrezia eventually found some happiness as Duchess of Ferrara. Through it all, Vannozza remained in Rome, a stable presence in the background of the Borgia saga. When she died in 1518 at the impressive age of 76, Vannozza was given an honorable funeral attended by Rome's elite, extraordinary for a woman known primarily as a pope's mistress. Her tomb was inscribed acknowledging her as the mother of the Duke of Gandia, Duke Valentinois, and the Duchess of Ferrara, her children's titles, rather than her relationship with the Pope. But everyone knew what it meant. Was being the mother of the infamous Borgia children Vannozza's greatest achievement or her heaviest burden?